Okay,
well, hello all. Welcome again for those of you that are back for the second or the third time to our house. I'm Michelle Militello.
I'm John Militello.
And we are really pleased to be able to host these events, these meet and greets. I think I said this after for our introduction last time, but after the first and definitely after the second, I said to John that I feel like we're really doing something good here, and I really hope that you all feel the same way.
And, for me, being a district leader, it's about getting people to vote and energized. And I've heard too many people say, I don't like anybody, I don't want to get involved in politics. And you really don't have a choice to get involved, I think, these days, because everybody's going to be impacted by it. And then I think, number one, the best way to get the vote out and to get people energized is to do primaries, is get energized in primaries. Because I said this last time, you're only, and I'm quoting somebody else, is you're only as good, politicians are only as good as the electorate. And so we need to know these candidates, we need to get to know them. And our person may not win, but if we get to know as many of them as possible, at least we're going to go out and support the one that at least aligns with us as most, closely. Yeah. So we wanted to do this to get people involved early on in the process, and then get their friends involved and get the vote out. Because we've lost too many votes because of apathy, because of I don't care, it's all bad. It's not all bad, it could be really good.
Yeah.
And we've had...
Yesterday was really good.
Yeah.
How about Mike?
Yeah. And even talking about that campaign and election, I think everybody was, the conventional wisdom, she was going to win by 4 points, 3 points. It was going to be really tight. She blew the doors off of it. And I think that says a lot for our country. It says a lot about our state. So, so thank you all for coming, and that's why we're here. So hopefully you guys tell friends about it. We have one more of these, and then there's two more. We have one more here, Brendan Gill, and then Kate's hosting one, and we have another one at Polly's.
Yeah, at Polly Murphy's.
And I would add, there's also another one for Tom on the 27th, so that's next Tuesday, in Bloomfield, right around the corner, right by Hot Bagels Abroad, the Brookdale. So if you know anyone who couldn't make it tonight, you can
another opportunity.
Yeah, there's another opportunity in 6 days, and that's at 7:30 at the Brookdale.
Or if you just want to see me.
Or if you just want to yeah,
Great.
so there's
okay.
another one.
Well, Deb, take it away.
Yeah,
I'll take it away.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so my name is Deb McLean. I'm a district leader here in Glen Ridge in District 5. In case you live in my district, you can come to me for any of your Democratic committee needs. And I've worked on a couple of campaigns, including Tom's. I was a staff member in 2022, and as I've said many times, I was the oldest living field organizer on that campaign. It was me at 70 and the 20-year-olds. So I cannot do this any longer as a staff member, but I'm doing this as a volunteer because I believe very strongly that Tom is by far the best candidate. Now, I'll give you my quick reasons why. Number one, he's ready to go on the very first day. He's already done this. He knows how things work. He knows where things are and how to do stuff. As Andy Kim said, I need Tom. We are in a national emergency. I'm sure you all know that. I don't have to tell you that. You wouldn't be here if you aren't aware of the extreme danger that we're in. He knows how to deal with that immediately. So he was endorsed by Andy Kim. Now you may know Tom more as a foreign policy guy. That's kind of his thing, at first, because he was the Secretary of State for Human Rights. What else and what else?
Democracy, labor. We just said for goodness.
Right, it's for goodness. So that was under Obama, right? So, but you may not know that he also has a strong record, and you can look all this up. I won't give it to you all tonight, obviously. But he has a strong record of delivering for his constituents in his district, part of which is now in this district. That's Dover and Milburn. For example, I just found this out the other day. There was a guy who came to do a testimonial for Tom and talked about how he saved their Head Start program, which was in danger of closing down out in Dover, right? So there's lots of things like that, including many, over 140 open town halls, which are like these. Open meaning you can ask any question you want, right? And I can attest to how difficult it is to get him to leave, because he will talk to every single last person. The last two events we went to, we walked out the door and they shut out the lights. They were like, go. We're going, Tom, we gotta go. All right, so now I think that a lot of this impulse to protect people that are vulnerable comes from the fact that he was born, I don't know if you know, he was born in Poland. He came here when he was 6. And I mean, he can tell you more about that. But as a person who escaped from a communist dictatorship, and a communist dictatorship and a fascist dictatorship come to the same thing. It really doesn't matter. I think he has the strongest appreciation for this country, the kind that immigrants have, that's probably stronger than even ours. And I would argue he has not only an intellectual, but a visceral understanding of the danger that we're in. And having had up close and personal dealings with the KGB back in the 80s, I share that. Which sometime I will tell you stories, but terrible, awful people. But so I share that perspective, right?
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, very nice. Now, should you think, lastly, I would say, should you think that, well, he was not born and raised in New Jersey, and should you think that maybe he's not enough of a Jersey boy?
I was raised in New Jersey.
No, don't mess my bit up. Now stay here. We rehearse this statement.
You didn't rehearse.
Yeah, well then, but just take a hint. Lest you think he's not enough of a Jersey boy. His birthday is September 23rd. Does anyone know who else's birthday is September 23rd?
Tell me it's Bruce. Is it Bruce?
Bruce. Now, I don't think there's anything that makes you more of a Jersey boy than sharing the birthday with Bruce Springsteen. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our next congressman from CD11 and a bona fide Jersey boy, Tom Malinowski.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, John. Thank you, Dusty. Hello. So no, we did not rehearse. We did not rehearse that at all. But she didn't tell the full story. So it's actually it was a very cold and stormy, gusty night in late September of 1965 on the Baltic Sea coast, and there was this gale force wind blowing from the Baltic Sea, frigid wind. And Polish woman, my mom, goes to the hospital to deliver her first child. And 2 a.m., I apparently decide to come out, and the nurse picks me up and hands me to my mother for the first time and says, Mrs. Malinowski, like, you may not know this, but this is an incredibly auspicious day. This is Bruce Springsteen's birthday. And in Polish, obviously, didn't like, Pani Malinowska, to jest dzień urodzenia Bruce Springsteen. And she picks me up, and literally her first words to me as my mother were, "Baby, you were born to run in Jersey." No, it's true.
That's a good one, Tom.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was there too. I remember this vividly. Okay, so one thing we learned, Deb and I, with our shared experiences of those countries, is that you don't get through this without a sense of humor. So I try to keep mine, and I hope you will keep yours, because it's important to our mental health and our morale, and morale is so important in deciding who wins a struggle like this. So I try to do that, but obviously this is some serious shit that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot, given what time of year it is, about the anniversary. Well, it's been the anniversary, but the memory of what I went through with Mikey, with all of our colleagues on January 6th, 2021. And you can imagine my memories of that are extremely vivid and extremely visceral. And a lot of them are terrible memories, because that was a terrible day for our country. But I've been actually thinking more wistfully about some of the better memories of that day. Because as it was coming to a close, we when we convinced our leadership not to send us home, but rather to send us back into the House chamber the moment like it was minimally safe so that we could finish the job, do our duty, certify the election. And when we'd done that, I remember this feeling of just like you failed, and we have secured this democracy. And that night, because we were there late. The final vote was not till like 3 or 4 in the morning. And at one point, one of my colleagues and I decided to just take a long walk through the massive Capitol building, which I always like to explore. It's one of the great privileges of being a member of Congress. But we wanted to see what they had done to it. And we wanted those memories, those images to be imprinted in our minds. We wanted to thank the police officers, obviously, who had literally just saved our lives. And as we were walking back to the chamber to vote, we passed through the Capitol Rotunda, the massive, iconic central almost altar, right, in the middle of the Capitol. And there are a couple of National Guardsmen there, and I look, and there's this young man on his hands and knees under a bench. I go, Andy? It was Andy Kim, and you guys have seen that image of him picking stuff up. And so we joined him because it felt like so much the right thing to do in that moment, because here was an act of decency after an act of total indecency. And I think that's one reason people responded to it, but there was another piece of symbolism for me. It felt to me that what he was doing, what we were doing collectively in the Congress that day was picking up the garbage, the moral garbage of the previous 4 years and throwing it in the trash. Because surely this was going to be the end of it. The American people would see what had happened, they would see that it was wrong, and they would say, even if they liked some of Trump's policies, we're not going to be governed by violence and by lies. And it felt like that for what? For at least a few weeks, maybe a few months after that. But here we are, facing a more acute version of what I thought we had beaten that night. And I'm here with you, I'm here running again because I was there that day and because we were wrong about that one part of it. We were wrong about the country moving on. I'm also here very much because of the other thing that Deb told you about me, that I'm an immigrant. The first time I took that sacred oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, was not when I was sworn into Congress. It was not when I was working at the State Department or the White House. It was when I was 10 years old, and my mom took me to that courthouse in Newark to be sworn in as an American citizen, because as you may know, the words you say are basically the same as what the president says when he's sworn in. And it meant a lot to me, maybe more than, like, you know, if you're an American kid, you learn that stuff in school. Like, those words meant more to me even at a young age, because I knew where I'd come from, and I knew the difference, and I knew that even with all of our imperfections in America, there was something very special about those countries embodied in those words. And that part of me right now, that part of my identity, is particularly hurting and angry over what we are seeing across the country. The government sending masked cowards into our cities, pulling Americans out of their cars, demanding that they show their papers, going into people's houses. I saw today, taking small children from a house as the mother is pleading, we have documentation, and the kids are being handcuffed. Which is, by the way, criminal. It's not. This is, you know, I think we should be saying restore law and order in Minnesota, because there are criminals on the streets who happen to be wearing a uniform, but also a mask. And you know the Russian police under Putin started wearing exactly the same masks about 20 years ago because it's about intimidation. And those thugs, I bet you most of them could not pass the citizenship test that the immigrants that they are persecuting study for every single day. Nor do they, as Deb said, understand, certainly the people who sent them don't understand, nearly as well as immigrants who are straight off a plane or a boat, what this country is about. Immigrants who respect and appreciate and love America a heck of a lot more than those men in the White House who are literally tweeting Nazi slogans on government accounts and then partying with Kanye West to his Heil Hitler song at night, not making it up. Because that's what much of the MAGA movement, particularly the young people being hired by this White House, think is cool, think is funny. And I think about all that stuff and all the other things, and I'm sure we all have our lists, right? I forget. I forget what I was angry at last month because there's just so much new stuff. That's part of the method. That's part of the method. And the Greenland stuff and trying to destroy our alliances and not helping Ukraine and ignoring Congress and the power of the purse. The tariffs, which I hope the Supreme Court will rule as unconstitutional because to me they clearly are, and so many other things. Ending cancer trials in the middle of a trial. One question just kind of keeps coming back to me, and that is, wouldn't it be cool if there were another institution in Washington, maybe like in a building down the street from the White House? We could send people there, we could call them representatives. Maybe we could write a job description for them and put it in a document called the Constitution. Maybe their job would be, we've been workshopping these phrases in my campaign, so forgive me if they're a little, but what were we saying, checks?
And balances.
What do you think? It's a little wonky, right? But maybe. I mean, this is what this is about right now. That's what Congress is for. Because the framers of our Constitution, they knew that this could happen. They knew if you give people the vote, occasionally they're going to vote for some asshole who abuses power, who is corrupt, because that's human nature. And the solution to that they came up with was you create these other branches of government that are supposed to be a check on abuse of power. And the Congress is the preeminent, not the co-equal, the preeminent branch. It's Article 1 of the Constitution. And we desperately need it to do its job right now. Not just checking the president, but also doing stuff that we need for the country. Not just patching holes in the healthcare system, but figuring out why it costs so much in America, so much more than other countries. Dealing with the energy challenge that we have, which can only be solved with clean energy, not just to save the planet, but to lower our electricity bills. Dealing with what to me personally is probably the single biggest unaddressed challenge that our government is not dealing with, and that's regulating all these new technologies that are changing our lives, from social media, for what it's done to our democracy, to our children, to all the new challenges posed by artificial intelligence. We need a legislative body to be doing these things. And so I guess the other reason I'm running for Congress is because I think there should be one, and we haven't really had one for the last year, although there's some signs, we'll talk about it, that some of them may be waking up. And so that's why I'm running. And the basic argument that I've made in terms, in this 11 candidate primary where you've got so many good Democrats who all basically agree on the big issues, is that what makes me unique is, as Deb suggested, I have the experience, I have the relationships, I even have the legal seniority in the Congress based on my past service to be effective, to deliver for our communities, and to stand up for these really big issues. I'm the only candidate in the race who would not be a freshman member of Congress if you sent me there. And maybe normally it wouldn't matter as much, but it is an emergency. It's like you're hiring a firefighter in a building that's on fire. Probably like hire someone who's put out fires before. And I've got a record of doing this, and you can judge me for better or worse on that record, of standing up to Trump in his first term, being the first Democrat from a swing district in America to call for his impeachment in 2019, standing up for immigrant rights when I wasn't supposed to, in a mostly Republican district. It out in my first poll ahead of the field, and in the last one that we just did that came back a few days ago, I'm also ahead of the field, and that feels great. It feels like we're doing what we need to do. But there have been some developments in the race the last few days. And if you've turned on a television, you know what they are. And I want to talk to you very straight about what they are. We've got one candidate in this race who's broken what I think should be a cardinal rule in a Democratic primary and thrown all of his money into a negative ad. And by the way, all the negativity is coming at me for reasons that I guess I should be proud of, but it still feels a little nasty. So you got one candidate who's just doing that. And then worse, there is an outside group that has put up an ad that will run 1,000 times between now and Election Day. There's at least $2, maybe $3 million behind this ad, and it's being seen in the entire New York metropolitan area. You will see this ad in Long Island. You will see this ad in Connecticut. That's how much money they put behind it. The group is AIPAC, the American Israel Political Action Committee. And that part is weird because I was and remain a pro-Israel person. I had a very strong pro-Israel voting record when I was in Congress and continue to believe that Israel has a very absolute right to defend itself as a Jewish and democratic state, particularly after October 7th. But they have one problem with me, and I talk to them all the time, so I know exactly what they're thinking and why they did this. Their problem is that I was not willing to pledge to them absolute support without restrictions, without conditions, for any aid that the government of Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu, might ask for in the future. Because I'm not a politician who will pander to whoever is asking me these questions. I know how foreign aid works, and that's not how it works. We're the United States. We make case-by-case judgments based on our interests and our values. And even if my values are very pro-Israel, there's some things that have happened that, most people in the pro-Israel community have questioned. And I want to maintain my independence. And so they told me, we're going to support somebody else. We're going to try to destroy you. And they didn't use that word, but that's what they're doing. And the other reason they gave was actually very interesting. They said, even though you're generally very pro-Israel, you've made this minor deviation from our hard line, and we worry you're going to, this is a direct quote, we worry you're going to be influential. And that scares us more than somebody who's completely against us but won't be as influential. So that's who's doing it and why. But in a way, the more important part is what they're saying. Because if you've seen the ad, what it alleges is that I support ICE and Trump's immigration crackdown. There's a mailer I saw today that literally pictures me in front of a group of ICE agents breaking down somebody's door.
I got that
And
today.
you got that?
Got it yesterday.
I've been doing this for a few years, and I've never had a campaign without drama. This is about as despicable as I've seen. To suggest, and the reason they'll say they can do this is because in 2019, I voted along with almost every Democrat, including Mikey, Andy Kim, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, the late great Donald Payne Jr. from Newark. We all voted for a bill to surge funding for emergency humanitarian aid to the border, to the southern border, because there was a huge crisis of migrants pressing against the border. $4.5 billion in humanitarian aid with $200 million for border security, because I believe in border security too. And out of that, they claim, I support ICE and I support what's happening right now. Fuck you. I'm not going to tolerate that. That is the worst thing you can say about a Democrat right now. When I'm standing up with the immigrants, I'm marching with them, I'm calling for ICE to be defunded. And like, this has now elevated our race into a national situation. Because if this group can do this and succeed against someone who's basically a mainstream Democrat on Israel, consistent with the majority, I think, of the Jewish community in the country, who voted for something that every other Democrat voted for, and if it works here, they will use this play against Democrats in primaries and in general elections all across the country in the midterms. So, look, I want to win the race because I desperately want to get back in there and fight for you and to fight Trump. And I think I'm the best candidate, but I also now desperately do not want this to work here because it's going to hurt the Democratic Party all over our country. And so I ask your support in the spirit of both of those questions. I hope I can convince you, and over the course of the evening, that I'm the best of many good choices in this race. But I also want you to think about these larger stakes. So with that, let me stop and shut up and invite you guys to ask questions, share concerns, launch bitter personal attacks. I'm ready for, I'm experienced with all of it, and I'll spend as long as you guys will allow me to answer them. Thank you.
Just building off of what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
Corporate money in politics is,
Yep.
I think, a main reason we ended up here,
Yep.
where we are.
Agreed.
And I know you have in the past taken money from corporations, from special interest groups. Moving forward, do you plan to continue that, and would you support legislation in Congress to ban that and make it illegal, as well as stop trading for?
So I'm a little concerned by that question because, in fact, from my very first race, from the first weeks of my very first race, I made the pledge to take not a single penny from a corporate PAC. And I'm very concerned that if anybody's saying anything different.
So special interest PACs then?
So is the Sierra Club a special interest?
Well, I know you were
Yeah.
just saying that AIPAC had supported you, and now they've decided not to.
Yes.
And so that's.
So
the
I did,
think
yes. So the pledge I took, which I've kept through every single race, is no corporate PAC money.
Okay.
I have taken, and like these contributions would be like $1,000 or $2,000 because that's usually what a quote issue-based PAC will give you. So I have taken contributions in the past from labor unions and from issue-based organizations. So like an environmental group or an LGBT rights group or End Citizens United, which is the main group in America that is campaigning against corporate money, is an issue-based PAC that has donated to me, right, as an example. There may be one or two that you might disagree with, right, but the principle is no corporate money, but I have been willing to take basically very small amounts of money from issue-based PACs. And so that is a very strong commitment that I will continue to keep. And the reason for that is, like, my doors are open to anybody. I mean, I represented one of the biggest pharmaceutical company districts in America. And if a pharma company wanted to come talk to me, sure, you employ people in my district, I want to hear your point of view. But I never want to be thinking in the back of my mind that if I displease you in this meeting, it's going to cost me something in my next campaign, because money is, unfortunately, it is, subconsciously politicians can't help but think about it. And so, like, it enabled me to vote for all the stuff they didn't like forcing Medicare, allowing Medicare to be able to negotiate lower drug prices, which we achieved in the last Congress that I was in, because there were enough Democrats willing to stand up to those special interests. So the answer is yes, and I would support legislation banning corporations from even being able to do the thing that I won't let them do for me. They shouldn't be able to do it for anybody else. I don't think corporations are people. I want a constitutional amendment to get rid of the horrible Citizens United decision. And in my first campaign, when I was still a candidate, I was the guy who organized all my fellow candidates in a letter to Nancy Pelosi saying the first bill we want to pass in January of 2019 was what became H.R. 1. It was that collection of anti-corruption, anti-big money in politics bills. So I was the guy who made that, helped make that happen the first time around. And then on stock trading, I support a ban not just on congressional members of Congress trading in stocks, but also senior executive branch officials. I would vote for one or the other, but I think it should be in Congress. Last time, I was one of only a handful of members that voluntarily did what the bill requires, and that was to put my retirement savings in a fully blind trust. Thank you. Sir.
Congressman, it's an honor to meet you, first of all. Second, there are some people who are saying that the Board of Peace is not really about the rebuilding of Gaza, but it's about the establishment or the attempted establishment of an organization to replace the United Nations. I was just wondering if you agree with that analysis, and if that's the case, is that something that a Democratic Congress can try to stop?
Yes. So, I was, I try to be fair, and I actually thought that this ceasefire and peace plan that this administration, which I feel so strongly about, that they helped negotiate, was a pretty good piece of diplomatic work, that it did actually create some hope for a long-term end to this horrible conflict that we just saw. And of course it did succeed in getting the hostages released and in a significant reduction of violence for the people of Gaza. And the next steps were, I thought, conceptually the right steps. So you would have Hamas disarm and leave Gaza, the Israeli Defense Forces withdraw, you would have an international security force deployed, eventually transitioning to a Palestinian force with a Palestinian governance of Gaza that would not be Hamas, that would not be the current kind of corrupt Palestinian Authority, and all of this under international supervision, with this Board of Peace, which sounded kind of weird and funny. Donald Trump was going to be the chairman, but my first reaction to it was maybe this is okay because it provides cover for all the work that has to be done in a way where governments in the region, including the government of Israel, would be a little wary about messing with it because Trump's name is emblazoned on the top. So conceptually it was not a bad idea, but he can't help himself. And it seems to be morphing from something that was supervising the rebuilding of Gaza to what you described as some kind of alternative or substitute for the UN Security Council with this amorphous mandate to make peace around the world, but not in accordance with any international rules or humanitarian principles. And where all the he's inviting the rogues gallery, so Russia, Putin's invited, Belarus is invited, his fascist buddy Viktor Orban is invited. And to get in, you've got to pay him $1 billion. He controls how the money is spent, and he gets to run it for the rest of his life, even if he's not president. If that were a Saturday Night Live skit 10 years ago, it would have been cut for not being, credible. So, I'm trying to get my head around this. A lot of what he's doing internationally is clearly about grift. Venezuela, there are people who were, okay with removing Maduro because they thought at least this would bring democracy to a country that was under dictatorship, which would have been fine, great. But it turns out he leaves the dictatorship in place, kind of like, you're the big mafia kingpin, and there's a smaller mafia kingpin, and you can say, okay, you get this neighborhood in Queens, it's okay, you get to keep it. I just want an envelope once a month. And the oil from Venezuela is his envelope. And he gets to, sell it, take the money, put it in a bank account in the Middle East, and now he's got a slush fund. Now he's got these billions from the Board of Peace, which he can then direct to projects around the world without Congress appropriating the money. So, there's a lot of the kind of opposition to Trump on foreign policy in Congress is about war powers, and that's important. But I think it needs to focus more on the corruption. I think we need to find creative ways to mess with his ability, what he thinks is his ability, to basically grab money from other countries and to use that money as a personal piggy bank. It needs to go after the shakedowns of foreign countries where his envoys go to the Middle East and they say, you gotta give him a plane. You gotta buy his Bitcoin. You gotta give him a golf resort deal if you want lower tariffs, if you want better treatment from the United States. So where I see, I definitely see myself carving out a role as a leader on international affairs. What I really want to hone in on when we have the majority is to end investigations of all of these corrupt webs that he's weaving around the world, to start putting stuff in legislation that prevents him from doing as much of this as possible, and to start warning all of the enablers now, whether it's a foreign government, whether it's an American corporation. If you get involved with this shit, here are the laws you may be breaking, here are the consequences that may accrue when there's a Democratic president. Start thinking now about those risks and don't cooperate. So that's the approach I would take.
Thank you.
Thanks.
First of all, I am Jewish and I'm totally comfortable with you and your record absolutely stands. AIPAC is an element. There are many other Jewish groups and I don't know if they would take on AIPAC, but have you made an effort to talk individually to them to say,
Yes.
could you as a group, and what's their reaction?
First of all, I've had tremendous support and positive reaction to this controversy from the Jewish community, many parts. No one can speak for the whole Jewish community, obviously, but many parts of the Jewish community in the district, including Jewish community leaders who are members of AIPAC, by the way. The number of people who are close to AIPAC who have had screaming matches with its leadership on my behalf in the last few days, like, what are you doing? You've gone out of your minds, is high and very heartening to me. So not just the more progressive, Jewish community that was already kind of very anti-AIPAC, but even people who are more kind of on that side reacted that way. And some of them, I think, will be speaking out publicly, including some clergy soon. Former U.S. ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro, who was the ambassador throughout the Obama period, put out a very strong video endorsing me today and denouncing these ads. And he's very much on the more conservative side of that spectrum. So I feel pretty good about that. I'm frankly a little bit more worried about people maybe even believing the ICE stuff, or maybe not believing it, but you hear it 100 times, and it starts worming into your brain, like, well, maybe, and there are 10 other candidates, so, right? So and we can't afford, I think I'm the strongest fundraiser in this race, but we cannot afford to put ads on broadcast TV, which is where this is. We're going to be, cable and digital platforms. We're doing great mail and all of those things, but we can't match this kind of spend. So we are very reliant in pushing back on top of what we can spend on word of mouth among the community of active Democrats in this district.
I wonder if you'll pick up young people because of that though, because they don't want somebody all the way over there blindly supporting Israel. And, you know, we all have our mixed feelings about the Gaza situation and Netanyahu. So it may be a way to kind of get your way in with some of these college kids in the district.
Well, I hope, you know, I'm not going to, the substance of the issue is sensitive and complicated, right?
Yes,
and
it
I've
is.
always, when people have asked me, like, where do you stand? I prefer to have several hours to describe it. But if you give me 10 seconds, I would say I'm pro-Israel, anti-Netanyahu, pro-Palestinian, anti-Hamas. And I try to, like, be principled about it with everybody. And I don't like a lot of what some of the college student protesters were saying. Some of it was overtly pro-Hamas,
Yes.
which I actually think is a betrayal of the Palestinian cause. But I do think, I do want people to note who they are going after. They are only going after one candidate in this race. There's somebody to the left of me on Israel, as
I
we all
saw
know,
B'nai
right?
Abraham, you saw with that vote.
Right?
You saw
And,
two
and
or
I'm
three.
not here, I think she represents a very important part of the party, and I agree with her in a lot of stuff, but like you'd think, and yet they decided to make me their target. And I think that's interesting, and I invite people to draw whatever conclusions they wish from that.
Because you worry them the most, because
I-
you could win it.
I think that's
And that's
basically
not
what they
bad
told
for
me. That's what they
Israel.
told me.
That's the craziness.
Yeah.
No, I think actually, like, our relationship with Israel would be stronger and more enduring if we were a little more willing to speak honestly about these things. It's like a marriage. Like, I mean, with my rabbi friends, we have this joke. Like, imagine like you were counseling a couple who are having trouble in their marriage. Would you say to the husband or the wife, the way to save this relationship is you must unquestioningly do whatever your spouse is demanding of you? Because if you don't, it would hurt the relationship. Right?
Yeah, that doesn't work.
No. You'd say you guys need to listen to each other and meet each other halfway. And, you know, it actually works in foreign policy too. All right.
I noticed you were careful to say defund ICE. There's been a lot of discussion lately about Democrats saying abolish ICE, defund ICE, reform ICE. Can you talk to us about why you chose that word and what your
Sure.
position is as to why you would want to defund ICE and what that means to you?
Yeah. So first of all, I see the challenge ahead on a lot of these issues as a three-stage process. Stage one is now. We are in the minority in the House and Senate. If you elect me, I will arrive in April. We will be in the minority for several more months, but not without power, not without leverage. But obviously, that's kind of the least of what hopefully we will have. We're not going to be able to, you know, even if you wanted to abolish ICE, you can't do it with the minority in the House and Senate and Trump in the White House. The most you can do in this stage is to start placing probably fairly small restrictions on what it can do through the budget process and scream really loud and use shame and try to bring Republicans along in some of the shame. Stage two, we've won the House, maybe the Senate in the midterm elections. So now we are writing, even if we just win the House, we are writing the first draft of the budget for the Department of Homeland Security. Still has to go to Trump, but we get to write the first draft. That gives us a lot more leverage to do, defund is kind of shorthand for severely restrict funding with conditions that restrict the behavior that we're seeing. So for example, no funds for operations with masked agents. No funds for operations in which they are arresting people without a warrant. No funds for the Border Patrol away from the border. No funds for operations at churches and schools and hospitals. And I think this doesn't get nearly enough attention, protecting the funding and the personnel for the real federal law enforcement agencies, like the FBI. 50% of the FBI agents in field offices across the country have been diverted by Trump to support petty immigration enforcement. What is the FBI's job? Protects us from terrorism, protects us from child trafficking and exploitation, from cyber attacks, from foreign espionage, from organized crimes. That's the real stuff. And we're not doing half of what we need to be doing right now to protect the country from those things. So I would use the budget process to wall off and protect the funding and the personnel. So that's what I mean when I say defund. Third stage is Project 2029.
Thank you.
And hopefully we have won the White House and one or two houses of Congress. Now we get to talk about how to reorganize the Department of Homeland Security. Congress alone with Trump in the White House can't do that, even if we might want to do it. But at that point, I would say we still have immigration laws. I still believe that we should be, massively in favor of legal immigration, but we should try to enforce our immigration laws. And so you need some enforcement arm at DHS. But I would rename it, I would reorganize it, I would, the Camden Police Department, when we were reforming that, they fired all the cops, and you start from scratch. I don't think you can keep the people who are hired by Trump for these bonuses. I don't think it's going to be enough to just replace the leadership and say, here are your new rules. Because the culture of the institution right now is just totally rotten. So I don't want to say abolish even there, because that sounds to people like we're just not going to have an immigration enforcement apparatus. And therefore it's free for all, open board, that's wrong and would kill us politically. I would completely turn it upside down at that point.
I think maybe we need a new word. Because defund ICE sounds like defund the police, and
Yeah.
the Republicans
Yeah, and people
had a
think that just
field
means
day with that.
Yeah.
right. It's true.
I mean, I'm okay, I'm comfortable with it right now because I'm so angry. And this is not the police. These people have no right. These people are arresting. Like they are pulling off-duty police officers out of their cars and saying, prove your citizenship. So I don't even want to give credence to the idea that these are law enforcement officers. And
They're not even legit.
you heard my point about the FBI. I want us to be the party that defends the federal law enforcers who are right now being fired. They're being taken off their jobs. They're being not allowed to do their jobs. We should be the party that defends the cops, the real cops. These are fake cops. And so in that contest, I take your point. I'm going to think about it, but I'm still kind of okay with that word. Sir?
Yeah, thank you. Listen, you have done a wonderful job about talking about the national issues that we're facing, and I thank you for that. Can you speak a little bit about the local issues that are driving you, the things that affect us here in New Jersey more than other people?
Well, I mean, I briefly mentioned one of them. When I got to Congress, I got on two committees, Transportation and Infrastructure and Foreign Affairs, and I used to joke that I have a simple job in Congress, dig a tunnel, and save the world. But in that order. And I mean, we are digging the tunnel, so that's why I'm maybe thinking more about saving the world. For me, it begins with infrastructure, it begins with transportation, it begins with all the issues that our commuters face. And part of that is like building stuff so that it works better and there's more capacity. But also, member of Congress can also lobby our state authorities to deliver better for our communities, and certainly for this part of Essex County, getting more train service on weekends, getting the bus service to work better for more people. That's stuff that I'm hearing a lot, and yes, the Gateway Tunnel and some of the earlier infrastructure improvements that will come from that project will enable New Jersey Transit to do more, but it could do more with the resources it has right now. And I'll be an advocate for the community on those issues. Another thing that I've been focused on is flooding. which affects not all communities, but unfortunately more and more communities. I got hit during Hurricane Ida, so I kind of felt personally how existential it can be when you have to start worrying every time there's a huge rainstorm, and you start wondering, am I safe in my own home? Which a lot of people now have to do. We're getting like 30 or 40% more rain in New Jersey every year than, say, 50, 60 years ago because of climate change. The rivers and streams cannot hold that without the water going somewhere that it's not supposed to go. And so that's partly a development challenge, which is more of a local issue. We just can't be building stuff the way we built stuff before, including big warehouses and paving over everything. But there is a federal piece where a member of Congress can bring home infrastructure to make the communities at least a bit more resilient. And I've got experience doing that in Morris County, Union County, with Milburn, which got hit really bad, in Ida as well. Mikey was working on some stuff when she was here, and that's work that I want to pick up with a vengeance, by talking to all of the, both community organizations and local governments in all the towns that are affected and figuring out what I can bring home.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't want to beat the AIPAC story to it too much, but I am also Jewish, and I noticed one thing that J Street co-endorsed you and Brendan Gill, it looked like, from an email I got from them. And as soon as I saw AIPAC attacking you, it basically meant I would probably vote for you. I'm trying to.
But they don't even call themselves.
I'm trying to figure. Well, yes, I know that. Yes, I know.
Well, they hide behind
That
this
was the
dark money
response.
group. Yeah.
To the question.
They're also,
said,
by the way, I'm sorry, but they're supporting another candidate.
well, that was my question.
Yeah.
What is their end game here? Because it's one thing to say, we don't like Malinowski because he isn't going to give Netanyahu a blank check. It's another thing for a right-wing organization that supports Trump to say, we don't like Malinowski because he voted for ICE 6 years ago. They can't use that in favor of the Republican candidate.
No, they'll say the opposite. They'll say whatever.
Yeah, they're gonna.
Yeah, so their style is they never, in their ad campaigns, they never mention Israel. They never, and when they're using the dark money PAC, this is the super.
No, I understand
right?
that you don't know their AIPAC, which is the problem of saying.
Well, we know.
We know, but the
Yeah.
problem of saying earlier, well, maybe that will get you young people's support.
Yeah, 'cause the ad
They
was-
won't know that it's AIPAC.
They won't know from seeing the ad. They can only know from the news media and from just community networks of people telling each other. So here's what they're
Well,
doing.
who are they supporting? Can you-
They are, yes. So they are supporting Tahisha Way. And by the way, that's the part of it that I don't mind at all, right? I've always defended, just even now, I'm very angry at them. I will defend the right of Americans within our campaign finance laws, which I want to change, but like within the laws, to organize themselves around issues that they believe in, and then to support the candidates that best represent their point of view. That's democracy. And sometimes that's going to go for me, sometimes that's going to go for an opponent of mine. That's fine. So they decided that Tahisha Way was more pure in aligning with their unconditional support for the government of Israel position. And, but they're not endorsing her formally. They're laundering several $1 million of money through something called the Lieutenant Governors, the National Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association. So the ads in favor of her will say paid for by that association, but that's all ultimately paid for by donation that AIPAC made to the Lieutenant Governors Association. And those are positive ads that say she's a great person. Okay, that's fine. What upset me was that in order to help her, and again, just to be brutally frank, she was like, when we were polling at the very bottom. So, and I know they polled as well, so they probably thought if we want to elect her, we also have to bring this person down. And so they decided to launch these vicious, dishonest, cynical attacks on me, an organization that, as you pointed out, also supports many Republicans who are supportive of mass deportation, right? So they don't care about the issue. They'll just use whatever they think will get people riled up against the person they don't like. But that's what's going on.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Hi, last night there were two ads. So there was the first ad about ICE,
Right.
but then there was another ad run by Brendan Gill.
That I'm a corrupt stock trader, yes.
Right,
Yeah.
and that, so, but then it said that you got kicked out of Congress.
What?
Well, I did, yes, that's true. The voters, yes.
Exact language, so they ran there was this investigation, and then the next sentence was, and he was kicked out of Congress.
Yeah.
So it was so
After they
duplicitous.
gerrymandered your districts.
Right,
I
yes.
actually called, I couldn't figure out how to get in touch with Brendan Gill, but I finally tracked him down to the Essex County
Right.
Democrats and left
Yeah.
a very angry email.
All
And
right.
an angry phone call, and I advised everybody to do that, but it seems so utterly corrupt of him. And how do you press back against that?
Well, you know, one of the challenges, one of the dilemmas in politics, and by the way, I ran in 3 of the toughest races in America, three elections in a row. In my first election in 2018, the negative ad, this is from the Republicans now, said that I was a lobbyist for terrorists. Because in my days when I used to work for a human rights organization, and I worked with the man who is still my closest kind of soul partner in Congress in the last 20 years, even though I disagree with him half the time, and that was John McCain. We worked to pass the legislation to ban the use of torture under the Bush administration when, you know, we were waterboarding people, some of whom were real terrorists. And so therefore I was a lobbyist for terrorist rights. In my second election, I was an advocate for pedophiles. Because 20 years ago, that same human rights organization wrote a letter to the Congress critiquing a major crime bill that had a provision that expanded the number of people who could be included in the National Sex Offenders Registry. And there was this ad that said, behind every corner, on every street, sex offenders are lurking, and Tom Malinowski is trying to defend their rights. And the final image is of a kind of a darkened room, middle-aged man opens the door, and there's a small child in the crib. Okay, the implication being that was me. This was when QAnon was a big deal, and it was using that imagery. In my third election, I was a corrupt stock trader, and I felt like, wow, my character's improving. And the same attack, by the way, was used against Mikey. You probably remember all the ads that she was a corrupt stock trader, and many other Democrats and and the basis of it was at least something that was partly true that I screwed up on, and that was I was late in submitting some of my monthly financial transaction reports in 2020 when I was a congressman, because I made the bonehead stupid decision, I'm going to take care of those myself. I'm not going to pay a law firm or an accounting firm thousands of dollars from my congressional budget to do it for me. That was stupid, and I deserve to be criticized for that and for making the mistake. There was a group, there was a staff group in the House that investigated it, that found that I had indeed done that, but also found that I had no involvement or prior knowledge of what my broker was doing with my retirement savings. So they said there's no question of insider trading or anything unethical. He just was late and needs to correct it, which I did. And as I mentioned before, through that process, and I was embarrassed by it, I put everything I had into a blind trust voluntarily, which is what the stock ban legislation would require of all members. So that was that. And it had nothing to do with my election loss because that was redistricting. And when we did the math, we found that in the 75% of the district that carried over from 2020 to 2022, I did better in every precinct in 22 that I did in 2020. Problem is, they added all of Warren County to the district, and so it overwhelmed what we were able to do. I still only lost by 2 points in a district that was designed to make me go away forever. So that's the story. I'm sad Brendan is doing this because I think, you know, and let me, I started this by saying there's a dilemma in politics. When you're being attacked, do you respond? And sometimes the problem is, like, if somebody accuses you of beating your spouse and you say, I didn't, right? You're just giving more airtime to the attack. Or another way to respond is just to attack the person who's doing it. And the most I'll say about this is that if I wanted to, the amount of material that is publicly available before grand juries in the state of New Jersey, it is so vast that it would be so easy, but I'm not going to do it. Because I think you actually bring yourself down when you do that. And I feel like I win this race by continuing to make a positive case for myself. And sometimes you shape that positive case so that it more directly or indirectly responds to an attack. So I'm gonna, you know, in the face of this AIPAC ad, you're gonna see even more messaging from me about how I'm standing against ICE in favor of immigrants. That's my response to that. I've had tons of messaging on all the work I've done on corruption, dark money, and politics, which is kind of an indirect response. But I'm not gonna go after the guy. I hope people will ask, why are you putting all your money in a negative ad that says nothing positive about you, and draw the right conclusions.
I just wanted, if you could talk about how you might affect the climate and chemistry in Congress with your relationship with Mr. Kim, which is inspiring, but also coming back after years away with a perspective, and also tapping into relationships. I'm interested in the Republicans.
Yeah.
If you have a relationship with Republicans
Yeah.
who are not happy with where they're at, and bringing them along with using your relationships of the
Yep.
past and your perspective coming back, can that be a positive for us as a nation?
Well, I feel I've been a little recharged being out of Congress. You know, it's, when I talked to my friends there, when I told them I was doing this, there were two reactions. It was one, oh my God, it would be great to have you back, but why on earth would you want to do this? Because it sucks here. And they're like demoralized. They're in the minority, you see all this stuff happening, you feel powerless. People in your own party say you're not fighting hard enough, and that, you know. And so kind of being out for a while, I think, has recharged my batteries. And in a way that will be good. Because like on day one, my problem on day one is that I'm going to have 20 pieces of legislation I want to introduce, and I can't do that, right? And 15 ideas for them, like you should try this, you should try that. And you got to prioritize. But I feel like my first day there will feel a lot better than if I'd been there every single day for the last 3 years. In terms of the relationships with Republicans, I mean, it was important to me to try to forge them when I was there. I joined something called the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is the one kind of functioning bipartisan group in the Congress, because I thought, you know, this would be kind of a safe private space where I could like talk to them and maybe forge some partnerships on issues where that's still possible. It was possible in my case, especially on foreign policy and national security issues, not a big surprise. And so I still have some friendships with the folks who are there. I was also, okay, now I'm going to tell you the real reason I'm running. But you have to like keep this in the room. Okay. So I was the starting shortstop in the Democrat baseball team. And okay, that's Democrats versus Republicans, but it's still kind of a bonding experience. And I was on the football team, which is a bipartisan team. And okay, it is a little scary being in a locker room with MAGA Republican guys. That's another whole. But you know, like they're informal ways of forging those relationships. The difficulty is we all see what's happening in their party. The ones who stick their necks out get their heads chopped off. You know, in my time there, not long ago, it was Adam Kinzinger, it was Liz Cheney. And they're gone. They were excommunicated from the Republican Party. The ones who are left see that and they say, I don't want to be Liz Cheney. At least she's famous. She can be somebody. If I get beat in the primary, which is what they're scared of, I'm not going to be anybody anymore. That's what's going through their minds. And yet, you see kind of new waves of Republicans, small groups at least, beginning to find their voice. I mean, look at my girlfriend Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example.
That's what I'm interested in, if
Yeah.
more about those people that bring along people who are reconsidering their allegiance to MAGA.
Yeah, or in her case, and by the way, the weirdest experience I've had recently was thinking, damn, Marjorie is resigning from Congress. We need Marjorie Taylor Greene. So
Strange times.
it's strange times, and I kind of, you know, let's go with the strange sometimes. And I think in her case it was, no, she was kind of a true believer in what she would have called America first. And then she realized one day that Trump isn't. That he's only a true believer in one thing, and that's himself, right? And then, you know, the thing that really focuses their minds and that gives them courage, the fear of losing the midterms. And that's where we all come in, because as we get closer to that, like on tariffs, there are, I think we're going to have some votes on, I forget if I mentioned this already, we may have some votes on tariffs in the House coming up, because there are some Republicans who a few months ago were just like zipping themselves. They hated this. But now the prospect of defeat focuses their minds, and they want a chance to vote against the tariffs. So there are always going to be opportunities to exploit, if we're smart about it, if we write legislation in ways that are designed to kind of split them, which is something I love doing. That's a dark art that I'm good at.
What can we be doing, or what can you be doing on a national basis for affordability? I don't mean the global affordability,
Right.
but housing in particular.
Housing in particular?
Yeah.
So actually, a little piece of good news. We don't really focus on the good news because
There's so much bad news.
there's so much bad news, and because of the thing that I really want to crush, which is social media algorithms that are designed to make us focus only on the bad news, because that's all we get. But there's actually a good bipartisan bill going through the Senate right now that's Elizabeth Warren and Tim Scott. Right? That's already interesting. And they basically collected all of the ideas that have been proposed by Democrats and Republicans to stimulate the availability of housing, to ease up on duplicative and onerous regulations that make it harder to build housing, to incentivize states and local communities that are doing that. Because, you know, supply and demand, that's what affordability always comes down to. And you need more of a supply of housing that's reasonably affordable, that's around mass transit. We're both good and bad at that in New Jersey. There's some communities that do it fairly well, others that put it in completely the wrong place. But the federal government can play a role by providing assistance, incentivizing local communities to do that the right way. So
That
that's
means giving up green acres, which a lot of, and all the NIMBY issues. So what are the kind of things Washington can do back
So it's, I mean, it is somewhat limited, right? Because most of the, not in my backyard or yes in my backyard debate, it is really about local, county, and state regulations.
Right.
And the federal government can't totally impose itself on that. But it can incentivize. The federal government can say, we have grants, we have funding that you can use for housing development if you do it the right way. And I do tend to be, there's this whole abundance thing. I do, kind of on housing, that makes sense to me. And I think there is a chance for bipartisan consensus around that. And, take it broader than housing. That's electricity prices. That's also supply and demand. There is huge new demand from data centers, mostly. Electric cars, not as much, but yes, we want that. I think fairly simple rule, like AI companies should either generate their own power or they should pay, as new ratepayers, they should pay a rate for the power that they draw from the grid that is high enough so that existing consumers don't pay more. That's the basic principle. And I think we're maybe heading in that direction, but right now we're all paying the price for this massive spike in data centers. And then on the supply side, the only new supply we're getting in electricity generation is coming from clean energy, renewable energy. That's just a fact. That's not something I'm wishing to be the case. It is just an economic fact. And the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a clean energy bill, a climate bill, basically, caused the first large increase in electricity generation capacity in America in over 20 years. Enough to power 30 million homes. We put online between 22 and 24, largely because we passed that bill. Thank you, Joe Biden, and Democrats in Congress. And that's now, they're stopping that. Because anything that has the word clean, sustainable, like literally the words, Musk went through with a Control F find search of any grant, any program that even had those words in it. And they tried to get rid of them. So that's another affordability issue. And don't forget tariffs. Just like that, we can make everything cost less by getting rid of the tariffs. In the back.
Yeah, my question is pretty broad, but like you brought up Musk, what's really confused me since Trump came in is they've really been breaking the law since he took his hand off.
Yep.
But
He didn't put his hand on the Bible.
he didn't even put his hand on the Bible. And it's been shocking to me that nobody has been able to do anything. Like, they've broken the law in so many ways. Elon Musk doesn't have a government position. Stephen Miller shouldn't be running whatever it is he's running.
The country.
That's what makes people think Democrats are kind of feckless and ineffective. It makes voters cynical. We don't understand why Republicans are just standing with their hands in their pockets when all of this hurts everybody. And then you see images of people being ripped out of cars. You know, my two kids are American citizens, but they were born overseas. Like, I lose sleep at night worrying that somebody's gonna pick one of them up.
Yep.
And there doesn't seem to be anything to do to stop that.
Yep.
So you're talking about you're gonna go back to Congress and you have to do things in stages and, you know, like.
I'm trying to be real with you, but I also don't want you to think that nothing can be done or that nothing is being done. Look, I'm going to start broadly and philosophically, and then I'm going to get more specific. This is psychological warfare. What Stephen Miller is good at, what Steve Bannon is good at, is throwing so much shit at us every day that we start feeling helpless, that we start feeling afraid, that we start feeling there's nothing we can do, they're getting away with everything. Because the psychological effect of that on people is to cause them to just turn inward, curl up into a ball. Let's just protect our family. Let's just protect our home and our community. Let me tell you a secret. Stephen Miller is scared of you and of all of us because he knows that they are going to be crushed in the midterms. And he knows they've got basically a year left to be able to do as much as they can. And we have to project in everything we do, everything we say. We have to project confidence in that because it's a test of wills, it's a test of strength, and we cannot allow them to make us feel in a way that that deflates us, that destroys our morale. We want to try to do that to them. That's a lesson I've learned looking at civic resistance to authoritarianism everywhere in the world. Now, the courts actually have shut down a lot of what Trump has tried to do. And for the most part, interestingly, they are obeying court rulings. In fact, they are, in most of these cases, most of the immigration rulings, where the National Guard has been kicked out of LA, kicked out of Portland, kicked out of Chicago, a string of victories for the good guys, they haven't even appealed those to the Supreme Court. They've accepted their defeat, but with, tweets saying the judges are all communists, and this is outrageous, and, hinting at Insurrection Act. But at the end of the day, they don't do those things. Remember what Trump's middle name is. No.
Taco.
Taco. You got it. Thank you. All right, for $500. Like bullies. It's we have to teach our kids this, right? Because it's hard to understand. Bullies are scared. And Trump's basic operating principle is to be strong with the weak and weak with the strong. And so we have to be strong in how we carry ourselves and believe that even though it's going to be bad, even though good people are going to get hurt, this is where we have to be realistic. We are going to beat this in the end. And, that's why we're here, right? We're not giving up. That's why we're marching in the No Kings rallies. 3% of the adult population of America marched in the last No Kings rallies. That's incredibly powerful. We need 60 million Americans to vote for Democrats in the midterms. 8 million of them marched at the last rally. You can get to 60 if 8 million are willing to actually march in a demonstration. So fasten your seatbelts, get ready for rough days and some sacrifice, but we're going to win this.
But, Tom, so Democrats have a huge image problem. He's shaking because he heard somebody's phone ding. So he's a little chihuahua in him. But, we're all engaged voters here, but the Democrats are actually polling as bad or worse than Trump in terms of an image as a brand. And I'm in advertising and brand, and I'm just in the middle of finishing up a project for the Minnesota Democratic Party, where we're doing deep ethnography research on swing voters, people who voted for Trump, voted for Biden, or voted for Biden, or then voted for Kamala. Very schizophrenic, low propensity vote, or voted for none of the above.
Right.
They voted for another candidate. And this is people, working class people of all races, genders, sexual orientation. And the interesting thing about watching these people talk and confess all their stuff in the camera, they hold our values. I just edited a video of them all talking, and I was almost afraid to show it. I was like, it sounds like we just spoke to Democrats. They weren't Democrats.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found is, while the good news is they hold our values, they don't see themselves as Democrats. They don't see themselves in you as a candidate or Democratic leaders.
Right.
And in fact, they're more, as offended as we are of Trump, they're more offended of us than Trump. Many of them, even Hispanics, said, well, at least he says what he's going to do. Even though it negatively impacts me, he says the truth. He doesn't waffle. He doesn't parse his words. He's very bold in his statements. So what can you do to help bring the Democrats? You spoke very loudly. You said, fuck you to these guys. Like, you're speaking with, you've kind of put away the civility in doing this. More Democrats need to do that, but what can you do?
No, they don't.
To-
Not civility.
What's
People
that?
should still remain civil.
Well, I know, but you know what I'm saying.
No cursing, no
right.
fingers,
But
no.
what are we gonna do to be real? That's what they want to hear. Like I'm telling you, the people who are in the swing voters that are going to win these elections want to hear straight answers, even if they don't agree with you. They respect that you have an opinion.
So I'll say a couple of things. When you say what can you do, I will single-handedly fix this. Obviously I can't, right? I think there are a couple of things that we can learn from Trump that are positive lessons. And not just from Trump, but from a lot of successful politicians these days, like all the way from Trump to Mamdani. Authenticity. Be real.
And Bernie.
And Bernie, yes, absolutely.
And Pete
right?
Buttigieg.
And Pete, right? Bernie and Pete, very different politics. What do they have in common? They're not reading from a script. They're not reading talking points. Let me be clear.
Yeah.
We stand for, and no, they're just talking. And you can see that it's sincere. You can see that they're genuinely trying to convince you of what they believe. And I think voters respond well to that. Trump in his own way is very authentic. Like there's a charm there, we have to admit.
No. But
Bear with me, right?
I'm telling you,
it appeals to people, right? Like we gotta, and I think, obviously we should stand for the right things, but we should try to pick leaders and candidates who have that capacity to speak authentically. And that doesn't mean there's a single personality that works. I think there are a lot of different personalities that work, right? And so that's number one. Number two, I think Americans like leaders who have a kind of a bias towards action. And I've been in a lot of Democratic administrations where they're full of lawyers, and no offense to anyone who might fit that description here, but something happens in the world or something happens in the country, and you appoint, you have a committee of all the mid-level staffers in all the government departments, and they think, okay, what does the president think about this? What can we do? And they meet for 3 or 4 weeks, and then they make recommendations to the slightly higher committee, which does the same thing. And then it goes to the principals committee, to the members of the cabinet, and they're like, oh, we still have a question. And then they send that question down to the lower committee, and it goes back and forth, and it's months and months of this, and in the end, they try to split the difference between all the different factions in the administration, because you mustn't, under any circumstance, present the president anything other than a consensus. We've all agreed, Mr. President, to do this. So the Secretary of Defense and State and Treasury, if they disagree, they work it out amongst themselves. And then at the end, 6 months after the thing happened, you do something that is kind of lowest common denominator. And Trump is like, no, I know what I believe. This is what we're going to do. And, I don't want to do that in a way that violates any laws. I don't want to do that in a way that violates my core values. But I do think Democrats should have leaders with the confidence to lead and to act. And that's something we can learn from him. Beyond that, there is the problem I've alluded to a couple of times here. The fundamental thing that broke, I think, in America in the last 20 years is how we get our information.
Yes.
And we have to, we can't be resigned to that. There was a choice made by huge corporations to deliver everything we see and hear about the world around us in a way that's designed to be addictive, in a way that's consciously designed to trigger our fear of one another, our divisions, our hatred of one another. If I put out a tweet that's clever and that disses Donald Trump, I can get millions of views. I've done that. And there's a kind of an endorphin rush. Wow, I got millions of views. if I put out in a tweet my 10-point affordability agenda, which you can find, it's on my website. Like, you know, it'll get 50 views. But I might like meet a group of people the next day, and someone will say, "You never talk about affordability," right? Joe Biden came into office thinking we got to deliver for the working class and stop being elitist Democrats, culture war bullshit, all that stuff. We got to deliver for the working class. And what did we do? We passed the biggest infrastructure bill in history, created an amazing number of jobs. We reversed the exodus of manufacturing jobs. We started growing manufacturing jobs in America through the CHIPS Act and other things. We said we would lower prescription drug prices for seniors. We lowered prescription drug prices for seniors. We said we would do something for veterans who had debilitating problems coming out of the Gulf Wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. We passed the biggest bill to help veterans in the history of our country. And when we went out to the American people in 2024 and we talked about that, a huge number of them said, "You're lying. You never did those things."
We didn't even market it though. And Biden said, "Oh, it's the bipartisan." He didn't say the Biden Act.
No, yes, he should have put the Biden on the, but there's nothing you can do
It's
to
a media.
fight a machine that works 1 trillion miles a second, 24 hours a day, and that decides every piece of information that we see. You're holding it right there, right? And so unless we ruthlessly go after that, I want to do to the big tech companies what Elon Musk did to USAID if they don't change. And we need Democratic leaders willing to say that. And unfortunately, we got too many who are like, "Oh, I still want their campaign money. I don't want them to spend money against me. We got to, you know, Silicon Valley used to be Democrats."
They were never Democrats.
They were
I worked in Silicon. They were all
pretending to
We
be
thought they were,
Democrats.
they were
right?
immoral.
But we
businessmen.
really got to just, we have to go after this. Because if we don't, we can win we have to win the next election without fixing this, by definition. We can win elections 51-49, but like when it's between democracy and fascism, you can't just like do alternating 51-49 elections. You just can't. And so like if I have a personal mission, it's that.
Kind of a specific foreign policy question, but both my parents worked for USAID their entire careers, and they retired before the agency got doged, but I grew up overseas. I saw how our goodwill, exercising soft power afforded us huge benefits in security and markets, and goodwill right back to us. And that has gone out the window in the last year and a half. Despite the fact that it's Congress's authority to dictate whether we have USAID or not. In the case that the House goes blue, perhaps the Senate goes blue, and maybe you're the chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Relations, how can we rebuild American soft power in the age of Trump, at least for the last 2 years that he's in power?
We can't fully fix it when he's still in power, obviously, because the president represents America, for better or worse, around the world. And right now, the world thinks that he's a lunatic, and therefore, like, that colors their image of America.
Yeah.
We can mitigate it, so I think Congress needs to speak in its own voice on foreign policy. Like, you know, I mentioned war powers resolutions, I would be pushing one right now on Greenland. Even if he's pulled back a little bit, I want Congress to say, you cannot attack an American ally without congressional authorization, which we will never give you. And partly because I want the rest of the world to see Congress asserting itself that way. I want Congress to restore foreign aid funding. Small piece of good news, there is an appropriations bill going through now, bipartisan, that restores not all, but a lot of what Elon Musk cut. So that's good. We can do more if we win the majority. But even then, like, USAID is gone, the function was moved to the State Department under Marco Rubio. So even if you restore some of the funding, they're still kind of in charge of it, and they've gotten rid of so many good people. So probably the most useful thing you can do is restoring like large grants to international humanitarian organizations, and the State Department just as the pass-through. The money, just really good NGOs doing good work. But it doesn't fully fix the problem until we can get back there in 2029. And my hope is that our friends around the world don't totally give up on us, because I don't think there's an alternative to a kind of positive American power and influence. There's no other great power that can do what we do. My hope is that they can hold on, and we elect good leaders who over time begin to fix this. But to really fix it, I think we need 2 presidential elections, not just one, to convince the world that this is not, we're not just flipping back and forth all the time.
To go a little bit from the sublime to maybe the ridiculous, you've lived in New Jersey long enough to know that we're kind of provincial and parochial in a lot of ways.
What?
And so I campaigned for you a few years ago in Westfield, where I grew up, in 7, where my mother lived for 65 years. But now you're here in 11th. And so the other guy, we know who that is very local and very embedded in local politics and the needs of the local communities. So what's your response to the view that you're here because there's an opening, but you're not really from here?
Right. So I'm the only candidate in the race who's represented any part of the 11th district in Congress before. Okay. Milburn, yeah, and Dover, but also Morris County. Like, you know, if you go to Morristown or Chatham or Medmenham or any town in Morris County, you ask people, where are you from? What do you think they'll tell you? Will anybody say, I hail from the 7th Congressional District, and my buddy here, he's from the 11th, right? No, I'm from Morris County, or I'm from one of those towns. So I don't think our identity is, we have a Jersey identity, we have our towns, we have our counties, we're north, south, pork roll, Taylor ham, but I don't think too many people have a congressional district identity. And to the extent they do, I represented part of this congressional district and half of Morris County. Mikey and I kind of shared Morris County together for 4 years. I was working in, I was teaching at Seton Hall University last year, so working in South Orange. I live in South Orange now. And like I find the needs of the communities are very, very similar, if not identical. They all have different cultures, right? That's also interesting about New Jersey. One town to the next, it's a different culture. But I think the needs are very similar. And at the end of the day, when a member of Congress is delivering for a community, it doesn't work. It's not like the member of Congress decides, this is what Glen Ridge needs, right? If I come here, if I come to Bloomfield or Belleville or Morristown and say, I know your community so well, I don't even need to hear from you. I'm going to decide what federal grant will be helpful. Like, that's not the way it works. The way it works is you hold town hall meetings. I held 140 of them in my 4 years in Congress. I don't know if our county commissioners do that. You talk to the local community organizations. You talk to the elected officials. In Essex County, there's a tendency to only talk to the people who are on an approved list. Right? These guys are with us, these guys aren't with us. I don't have that problem because I'm not part of that political culture from New Jersey. And so the way it works is you go to a community, you hold town halls, you talk to the local community groups, you talk to the mayor, to the council, doesn't matter what faction they belong to, or even if they're Democrats or Republicans, and you figure out, like they tell you, here's what we need. Like, our number one problem is flooding, Tom. Our number one problem is the train service. Our number one problem is we need a street paved. And then you try to deliver for that as best as you can. And so, like, that's my response.
I don't wanna throw something that's impossible at you, but
Try it.
when he mentioned, somebody just said, try to arouse some sense of shame and, repudiation among Republicans in Congress so that you could peel off enough to impeach and hold them responsible. And so the question I would ask is, can you imagine even being able to do that, to sort of have Democrats loudly every day talk about the misery and horror that's happening all over the country?
It's going to come bottom up. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I will say that name again. If that's possible, then actually anything is possible.
And Lauren Boebert, because
Lauren,
because the water bill got
the water bill, yeah.
Yeah, she's in trouble.
Ooh.
Yeah, but now she's washing her hands of Epstein.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm still no. I'm Team Marjorie. Let's just establish that here. So, but it's got to come from their constituents. It's got to come bottom up. Look, we just got 17 Republicans in the House voting with Democrats to extend the Obamacare subsidies for 3 years with no conditions.
Wow.
Okay. That's because they're hearing from their folks back home, and they're scared to lose. We're not like at an impeachment point where, and I don't know if we ever will be, but we'll know it when we see it. We'll know it when we feel it, and that's the time to pounce. And so I think, I wouldn't be running if I didn't think these things were possible. Look, Trump's underwater in immigration right now. Because what he's doing is disgusting and not popular, and people are seeing decorated veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces getting picked up, moms dropping their kids off at school, American citizens. And that stuff, even the algorithm, right, is not, that's powerful enough to break through. The Epstein files was powerful enough to break through. And, we need to seize all of those opportunities when they come and build to the moment that you are waiting for.
Wait, about impeachment though. I've been seeing a lot of pundits talk about this.
Yeah.
And it seems like every time somebody gets impeached, they get more popular.
Right. Well, they were impeached but not convicted.
Right, exactly.
And you
So-
can't be convicted with the current.
So would it be to our advantage for do another impeachment? It
No.
didn't work the first couple of times.
Not right now. So I would only, and by the way, you see this finger?
Yeah.
This finger has impeached Donald Trump twice. And don't worry, I have washed it. But I wouldn't advocate, and I think it was the right thing to do then. And damn Mitch McConnell for knowing, and saying that what Trump did was wrong and impeachable, but not convicting him. But right now, I would focus more on the anti-corruption side, because I think that's what they're afraid of. I want to do the stuff that they're afraid of. And they're not afraid of impeachment right now. What would change that is if we sensed a different, a movement among the public, because things have gotten so bad that, you have to feel this out. Maybe it's changed so much that the Senate would be willing to convict. But I don't think we're close to that right now. So I wouldn't be pushing that just to get my million views on Twitter.
And you won't get a law firm to support it either.
Well, there's still
I
plenty.
know, but they're all very, very nervous. Taking on impeachment, they know they'll pay the piper.
There are a few, the fact that there were any that capitulated is really bad, but I know, there's still very big firms in this country that are taking all these cases that they're losing in the courts, so.
Those 17 Republicans who voted for the Obamacare subsidies, do they have a chance of winning? Because they voted with Trump on everything else. So is Mike Lawler going to win again because of that?
Well, one of them is my dear friend Tom Kane Jr.
Yeah.
It was the first time. You know it's bad when he, and I don't know. It depends again where the public is, and I think they're sensing that the public is
It all depends on
actually.
the price of eggs, doesn't it?
Yeah. But it's a good question. So when we pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill, infrastructure, that shouldn't be Democratic or Republican. Only 13 Republicans had the guts to vote for it. Probably 100 of them were for it. 13 voted for
They're
it.
taking credit for it, I'm sure.
Well, of course.
Of course.
Sure.
Of those 13, I forget the number, but it's like maybe 1 or 2 are left. And Trump immediately targeted them for voting for the infrastructure bill.
He now puts his signs on.
Of course. So the fact that 17 were willing to do this, that tells you something about the political dynamic of the moment and that they're more afraid of losing in the general election in November than they are afraid of Trump killing them in a primary. That's what that tells you. And we need that number to grow.
I want to engage in an alarming personal confession on the way to say thank you and congratulations. I'm a refugee from the 7th district, and probably the reddest part of the 7th district. Where they have hay wagons that say God, guns, and Trump. I'm happy to have moved here. I didn't move because I was going to vote for you. Though I did.
I was hoping, I've told many people, like, of course you can vote for me. Just sell your house and
What's the tone of this district? Clearly been solidly Democratic. Are we reasonably?
No, I'm very focused on the primary now for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But I don't want anyone to take April for granted. So April 16th is the general election. And I think, I don't know this, but I think that the Republicans will invest more in this special election because it's a special election. The only thing that's happening in the country at that time, I think they'll invest more than they did in their races against Mikey. Because why not? They've got tons of money, it's the only thing going, and I'm very confident that if I'm the nominee, I will win that race, because I fought like the hardest races and won them before. And I'm also, like, one argument I'd make for myself, self-serving, but I'm tested, like, it's not like I have no weaknesses, but all of my weaknesses have been totally litigated with zillions of dollars of ads before. So there's nothing new. Like what Brendan is using is exactly what the Republicans used against me. Whereas with some of the other candidates, and I genuinely think most of them are really fine people, but we don't know that, right? Because in a primary, we're not really being vetted in that way. And so I want to make sure that we nominate somebody where there's not a risk in April.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. We have a few more